I understand that this is a niche video. I've been thinking about my time in Star Wars The Old Republic over the last 13 years, and what my favorite part about it was. And for me, the answer is pretty clear. It's the PvP.
Oh, wait.
Oh! Oh! Wow, you see this shit? You see this shit? You see this shit?
Dude, that's like the most DPS I've ever done in a game ever.
SWTOR PVP shaped me as a gamer. It was the springboard to my competitive gaming career in the mid-2010s. I remember entering my very first Warzone. It was an Alderaan Civil War. I had no idea what I was doing or how abilities worked differently in PvP than in PvE. After fumbling my way through a rotation, I would head over to the Imperial Fleet to purchase the next piece of gear from the vendor. Back in the early days of the game, PvP and PvE gear were separated by a stat called expertise. I was captivated by player versus player almost immediately. I was absolutely trash at the game back then, but I still enjoyed it. This may seem odd to some of you, but it's hard to explain it unless you love to compete. If you're not a competitive person, this won't make a lot of sense to you.
Both for PvP is something that is so good and so niche that I felt it was not my responsibility, but I felt the opportunity that I could share with more people.
What was your thing for PvP outside of like, you know, your past with other MMOs?
When it came to SWTOR, well, when it comes to MMO PvP in general, I've always enjoyed more unorthodox ways of PvP, right?
Mm-hmm.
My main MMO throughout my life has been the EVE Online. I've been playing that since, you know, fucking 2003, 2004. I think the biggest thing for me that I enjoyed about SWTOR's PvP was the tank mechanics, right? It made tanks actually very valuable in the PvP, whereas, you know, like WoW, it's like, why are you playing tank unless you're like trying to run flags or something in like a battleground?
Yeah, I mean, PvP in general, I think is just, or like back then was way more fun, I would say, but still now for me, just the core gameplay of it is fun, right? So I just really enjoy the classes and how they interact with each other. I mean, some classes more than others, but I just like the core gameplay of it really is for me the thing, right? When you compare it to raiding or to PvE, for example, right, it's much more static. So once you figure out the boss mechanics, it's then basically always the same. You're kind of repeating the same, almost like pattern again. Try not to make some stupid mistakes, right? And you have some RNG, but PvP, what I like about it is that it's basically, you know, dynamic and every match is a little different, right?
Yeah.
And
I mean, Civil War was okay, but like
Mm-hmm.
Huttball, Void Star, I thought they were awesome. I loved some of the I loved the idea of tossing the Huttball and, you know, just, you know, literally trying to score like a football game or something.
Yeah.
I thought Huttball was absolutely phenomenal. For some reason, I just enjoyed it more than like WoW PvP, right?
Mm-hmm.
WoW PvP is probably the most common, probably the most favorable MMO PvP there is right now in the landscape, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there's just something about WoW's PvP that never vibed well with me.
What drew me to SWTOR over, say, WoW was the quick pace.
Mm-hmm.
It was much quicker tab targeting, and the animations and animation canceling seemed quicker responsive. You know, as those rigs that were coming out at the time were more advanced, you had way better graphics cards, way better CPUs, all that stuff. It was more entertaining.
That SWTOR offered with having resolve and like a healer tank combo is like more mandatory. The stun system was like, I feel like the resolve system was a little bit more streamlined. Because like I'm playing WoW now off and on, or have been for the last few years, and I cannot get into PvP of WoW.
Fucking Furion was like, I liked how crazy it was, and I was like, you mean like huttball or something? And both him and Weston were like, yeah, no, huttball, GOAT game mode. If they could only play that right now, they would probably still be playing. But
Yeah. See, and then, I mean, I didn't like. You ever see the newer huttball?
oh yeah, Quest Ball, or like the
Ball.
abandoned one too. There's like a one on like
Yeah, there was a one after that.
Sky Shredder, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't like that one.
No,
I could do with Quest Ball and the OG one, but that new one, I was just like,
yeah. I think most people would agree that was not it.
not in the spirit of original huttball for sure.
Gosh, I feel like I have to go back to like the very beginning, way before I ever played Star Wars. Because I used to play World of Warcraft or WoW on a private server, and the PvP was always my favorite thing there, because I always just like PvE's fun, but it's the same thing every time.
Yeah.
Whereas PvP, it's dynamic, it's different. No matter what you're doing, it's always going to be a little bit different. And it's like, I don't know, I'm a guy, so competition against other people is just like in my blood and in my nature, I guess. But
yeah.
So just have to like compete and do that. It was almost like sports, but not sports, but I could jump in and do it whenever I wanted, so I didn't have to like wait for a game or something like that. So why Star Wars specifically though? I mean, I liked a lot of what especially once I got geared up and it was a little more fun, but like the competitive aspect of it was just always really fun to play. I liked how they incorporated like tanks into PvP. I thought it was really creative how they did that, because no other game, other than having like a tank like peel for you a little bit, ever made use of a good tank. Like WoW didn't, for sure. But like the fact that like they had guard and taunts and other stuff like that was always a ton of fun. And I'm a huge Star Wars nerd, so I couldn't put down Star Wars.
Right, no, that makes sense. When I first started, it wasn't about winning only. It was about consistently improving at the game mode. From rotating to grass faster to learning how to keybind, I was completely immersed in the process. Once I became semi-competent at PvP, I would apply to every PvP guild on my server, which was Jung Ma at the time. I was very lucky to get invited by one of the top guilds on that server, known as the Regulators. I would just be queuing solo and running into Regulator premades. And my team that I was on was always like, oh, God damn it, Regulators are in queue, like, we're gonna get our asses kicked, it's gonna be bad. And then I just was like thinking, man, these guys are super amazing, I want to be in this guild. So I honestly just kind of not followed people around, but kind of followed them around if I could like see.
Oh
them,
no,
like,
you gotta get your name in the pool somehow,
Yeah.
right? If you're trying to join them, so yeah. That's
So-
how I've joined guilds in previous MMOs, right?
Yeah,
You
you
gotta make a name for yourself. You just gotta be around.
Yeah, and so I would whisper Iron Maiden. I don't know why I remember this so well, but it was an Alderaan Civil War. I was sitting guarding for some reason, and Iron Maiden was in
the worst
was in
job.
Exactly. I was sitting there, and Iron Maiden was, I guess, out fighting or whatever, and I whisper him mid match, and I'm like, hey, can I join Regulators? And he's like, no. And I'm like, okay, whatever. What I gotta do to get in? And he basically was like, you just gotta like, prove yourself. Like if I see you in games, like I'll check the leaderboard, not the leaderboard, but like the scoreboard at the end, like, see where you're at. And so I did that for about 2 weeks.
Was it Etsy maybe? I can't remember. But either way, I jumped in and joined with Vicious at that point. But I think that was after the Regulators days.
Oh,
we just loved that. It was in all capitals, and we made fun of that the entire time.
That was really funny. I love that.
We always thought it was like, what are they doing? And then who was it that made the Deregulators guild on the imp side? I forget what his name was, but that was just hilarious trolling to me. So but yes, then I jumped in and joined with Vicious, and it was a lot of fun. But goodness,
oh, that's great. I forgot you were in Credit Shot, because me and Weston were talking about the Credit Shot days, and I was getting old footage from people, and there was a lot of Weston's games were like against Credit Shot in the early like 4v4 days. So there's a lot of games out there.
I mean, it was really just us and them were really the only two major competitive. At least when it was 4v4, it was like
Right.
that was about it. So
That and, I mean, I guess regulators had some groups, but then it was like Taking Lives too. But Taking Lives wasn't that big. I don't remember how I was able to convince him to let me join. Considering I was 14 or 15 years old at the time, many of the people I played with were in their mid to late 20s and some early 30s. I had a terrible computer, so I couldn't keep up with any of them in any category. So I switched over to healing right before 2.0, and that was where things really began to take shape.
Yeah,
And-
that's so much clutter on your screen.
I know, I know, a lot of clutter. I didn't have a Naga yet at this point either. So
Oh, yeah, that's kind of hard to.
yeah, it was
Kind of hard to not click without one of those.
Ranked PvP, or rated as some may remember it, was the cream of the crop when it came to player versus player. You could prove yourself on another level from regular war zones against the best of the best. Most of the early rated PvP days were done in pre-season. The first real ranked season wouldn't emerge until BioWare announced 4v4 arenas. Now, depending on who you talk to, some will say that this is where ranked died before it even had a chance. In conversations, I was talking to some older players who honestly left right after 2.0, and they were like, yeah man, like the 8v8 ranked was what I was really excited for, and when they decided to swap it out for 4v4 arenas, you know, I was pretty much done with it at the time. Do you feel similar, or
4v4 arenas is a completely different game to 8v8.
Right.
Like that's two completely different games. So for me, yeah, I can understand that, you know, some people say that. I mean, one form of rank died, right? And they introduced another one, which is just, you know, I guess didn't appeal to as many players, or many of the 8s players at least. So because it is a completely different game, you know, the one is deathmatch, the other one is more objective focused with some deathmatch in between. But I don't know. I mean, for sure, at least I stuck around, so it didn't kill the game for me. But
Right.
for sure, many players left because it was kind of foreshadowing, you know, like a foreboding sign of what was to come. From the side of the developers, that they said, yeah, we couldn't. I still remember that they had some wording. We couldn't properly support this game mode and so on and so on.
Season 2, right? Season 1 or Season 2, where 4v4 got introduced,
Yeah.
and I didn't really just care for 4v4 all that much, right? I was just
Okay.
like, if they're gonna bring it down to like, because you can do ranked like
yeah, ranked
battlegrounds
8s,
before.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
rank 8's just left, right?
Yeah.
And then it's just like, well, you know, if I'm gonna play this like deathmatch format, why wouldn't I just play something more like WoW, where it's just, you know, there's more competition, and there's, I would say, there's more competition, and it's overall more popular PvP format than SWTOR, right?
Pre-season took forever. There was a lot of feedback from the players, what to do and so on and so on, what to improve. But already back then, you could kind of see some of the issues that still plague the game today, I would say.
Okay, yeah, no, that makes sense. Because I was too young to pay attention to the forums when that happened. All I knew was that, like, okay, they're getting rid of 8v8s, they're going to 4v4s, and everyone was playing in the preseason because they wanted to get the deadly contender titles and all of that other stuff. So I didn't have a huge grasp on what it meant or any implications of it going forward, but I appreciate that perspective. For context, the preseason of rated PvP didn't pop often. It was 8v8 ranked at the time, nearly double of what it became in the later years. 8v8 ranked was organized by a handful of guilds on the server and really only popped at certain times at night, but none of that really mattered to me at all. I was in the freaking Regulators Guild. I remember jumping into Raid Call, I don't even think that still exists anymore, and telling my friends in my current guild, Unmasked Rebellion, that I had scored an invite to one of the top PvP guilds on Jung Ma. I would split my time between the two guilds, and I had everything I could ever want in SWTOR. I could learn PvP from some of the best in the business, and as a wide-eyed teenager with something to prove, I would spend an average of 8 hours a day playing SWTOR PvP. Thank God for homeschooling. After a few months in the Regulators Guild, there was some type of fallout between some of the members. I don't really remember that too well. Etzion and a couple of others left the guild to form what would be known as Shots Fired and Vicious. Since I mainly ran with Etzion and his friends, I asked if I could leave with them. Etzion agreed to bring me along, provided I didn't cause any trouble, whatever that meant.
Like, I proposed, like, hey, like, let's do this thing where, like, let's just pick a time. Let's go to, like, Outlaw's Den, and we'll just practice fours and, like, mix match so, like, we all play really well together. Because we used to do stuff like that back in, like, Dark Legion of the Empire. I remember doing that. And, like, some of the guild leaders and guild officers, like, yeah, that's cool. Like, let's do that. And I just remember, like, going to Outlaw's Den, like, nobody showing up. And I was like, why is nobody here? But then when you guys want to, like, play ranked, we don't gel well together. We have problems. I just remember, like, being really pissed, and, like, Kaigen got all upset about me with that, and I, like, got, yelled at him, and that was probably the thing that, like, led. I can't remember the name of the guild, but it's like, I'm gonna leave. That's it.
That's really interesting, because me and Weston had this conversation, because I was asking him about the split from Regulators to Vicious and Shots Fired. And
that's what that was.
Yeah, yeah. He quoted that as why there was a split there, because it was like, I mean, just like for context here, like the only guild leaders or people that I knew, was like you, Kaigen, Iron Maiden, those people.
Oh, Iron Maiden, yeah.
And like, I obviously from Weston's point of view was, no one showed up to that, which made you upset. Rightfully so.
I was so pissed.
And
oh my god.
I guess, like, at that time, like, Sebek was really, really trolling people. Like, he
yes.
totally did. And they were like, yeah, no, fuck this, we're done.
I didn't want to put up with him anymore. Yeah, it was like, and there's also, like, an age difference and maturity difference. So you had, like, the more immature guys. So, like, Sebek was, like, super immature. I was, like, 21 at the time, or, like, 22. So I was, like, pretty immature. And, Weston's kind of like my age as well. So, like, you had some of the younger guys, and then some of the guys like even Iron Maiden or Kaigen and those guys, were like in their, mid-30s at the time.
After joining Vicious, I met a few others who I really grew to admire in the PvP scene. Weston, the operative healer, Rivik, the deception assassin, A Tool Striker, the guardian tank, Ari, the guardian DPS, and Beat, the Sin tank. Whether any of these guys knew it at the time, I wanted to become as good as they were. I would just sit and mumble and listen to them talk strats and prep for 8v8 ranked. I was never good enough to join the A team, obviously, given probably what's on the screen right now, but they let me do in-house ranked with them when there wasn't a whole lot going on. In-house ranked was when there were 16 of us online at the time, and we just formed 2 ops groups and joined into ranked war zones and hopefully fought against each other. I will never forget about Weston teaching me operative healing when he had some spare time.
Which I did enjoy teaching everyone PvP and SWTOR, because I feel like there's at least like 10 or 15 people in the guild that I pretty seriously trained, I feel like, on how to actually play the game.
Yeah, no, that that's gonna stick with a lot of people, well, depending on their age. But no, definitely stuck with me. We'll probably continue to. I mean, but now like when I play other games, I still kind of think back to certain strats, because some of the stuff is kind of timeless, just basic common sense stuff.
Yeah, like once you get the understanding of like how a PvP is supposed to be, it's like if you can't do anything and you're vulnerable, it's a window.
My skill though would hit a massive wall because the computer I was using was so terrible that I couldn't react fast enough. Again, you're probably seeing this gameplay on the screen right now, and I still can't believe I was able to play ranked like this, or that they even let me. Crazy shit. It was so bad that Weston refused to heal against me because I was so freaking awful, there was no challenge. And he was right. A Tool Striker taught me about guardian tank. We would sit on this spot on Coruscant and just duel for about 10 to 20 minutes, showing me the ins and out of crowd control and how to properly use a CC breaker. At one point, he even said, "Connecticut, listen. You're a cool dude, but holy fuck, you need to get a gaming mouse if you want to be remotely good in ranked. So then I begged my dad to drive me to Best Buy so I could buy the mouse he recommended, the Razer Naga. If you knew me back in those days, I went by Connecticut and Shinkra on Operative and Scoundrel respectively. I think that's how a lot of people remember me. I still use that brand of mouse to this day, and had it not been for these guys taking the time to teach me, I would have never become the player I am now. I probably, if I'm being honest, like there never was as good of a time as those days. Even though I was, you know, super young, being talked to by people who were not twice my age, but probably close to it. And I just remember being like, holy fuck, all these adults like think I'm cool enough to like be around them, like hold like I
no. I get the same thing. You know, growing up, my best friends, you know, people who live next door to me, they were all like 3 years older than me, right? So when I was a freshman, they were seniors, right? I was always got to hang out with them, right? And I had a similar feeling with that, just always growing up. So I get it.
And I just thought that, you know, we were kind of in the middle of COVID pandemic, and I was shut away in my room for a very long time, and I had nothing else to do. And I remember seeing people like Sark and Hutch and Cnanners and these guys that I like looked up to and worshipped as a kid. That was like my content outlet, right? Was watching these guys make their old Modern Warfare 2 videos. And I was like, I want to be like that one day. And then I was like, oh, I can imitate that very poorly with Star Wars: The Old Republic. And it doesn't take anything except for just the, you know, the cojones to get up there and actually do it.
Right.
And so I figured I had something that I could share that some people would be interested in, and it turned into a beautiful little content creating adventure.
My time with the guild was easily one of my favorite times in gaming, and I don't think they really knew just how bad my computer was or just how much I looked up to each and every one of them. The people that I idolized in that entire guild, and I gotta say, I don't say I do now because it's been like a decade since I've spoken to many of them, but like a 14-year-old Connecticut was like, okay, Weston is God, Atul is Zeus, Etzion fucking, I don't know, Jordan and the Wolf of Wall Street, like fucking amazing as people that I want to like keep spending time with. It was with Vicious that I was able to secure gold rank in season 1 on my Scoundrel and acquire Garada's Rancor and the S1 All-Star title. I would continue to place in low gold and high silver for the first 3 seasons of ranked arenas. Now, being 15 years old at the time, I was not the smartest kid, and I would often get trolled and not take it well. Looking back on it, I don't regret being in that guild. They toughened me up and showed me a true competitive atmosphere that I really appreciated. Unfortunately though, I was kicked out of the guild by Etzion during season 3 because truthfully, I was too young to be running with them, and we laugh about it now, but at the time, I was mad as hell.
You got kicked out?
You didn't know this?
No.
Oh yeah, okay, so definitely not putting this in, but I'll just tell you now. So Sebek essentially, like,
god,
yeah, exactly. I could just say Sebek, but
okay, Sebek caused it. Got it.
The reasoning was simply because I was too young to be there. Correct?
Essentially, yeah.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah.
Like, all right, we're getting a bit rowdy in here. I don't feel safe having a child around.
Yeah, and that wasn't like the first time something like that had happened. That was like that day before was like when it kind of like it peaked for sure, and we had to make a decision. But like we knew you were young. We knew that you were going through a lot of really, really shitty stuff in your home life, and I'm like, I don't think this is a safe environment for you. And I didn't want to change the vibe of the guild specifically to bring it to a tone that a 16-year-old could tolerate.
Right. No,
and
we were already an established group of toxic people, and he was trying to save somebody that was brand new, I think.
Yeah, and I was trying to remove you from that to save you from that.
Yeah.
Because as it was, I was already having daily talks with most of those guys who were like the biggest trolls and trying to get them to a point of mental sanity that was good for the world. Because they're
Yeah.
all really talented people, and they're all going to be doing really great things. Like, Weston's a freaking doctor.
Yeah.
Adol's, like, making big money doing tech. Taylor he's a psychologist or psychiatrist, I can't remember. But Taylor was always a good kid, so...
Yeah.
But Atris, like, he went into the military and became, like, an intelligence officer and stuff. And he got married, he's probably going to have kids and stuff. But, like, you were, like, the one that I knew couldn't handle that environment. At least I didn't want you to be shaped by it.
Right.
And there were other people that were younger, like Weiston, but he was already pretty well adjusted anyways. Not to say that you weren't, but you were just going through way too many different things.
He could be just as toxic, but he was very, very good at the game too.
Right.
Yeah. And I told you this at least 2 or 3 times before, like, listen, if this is not a safe environment, I'm probably going to remove you.
I remember it, like, now, like going back and going through it, but you sent me to Arcanum with Natila, and I remember talking to her about it, like, that night. She would try to get me to, like, do stuff, and I was like, no, I want to go back. And she's like, you can't go back. I'm like, but I want to.
I want to.
Yeah, no, I, like, looking back on it now, like, and I've talked to you about it before. I was like, super good move of you to do. Like, no one here is like, wow. I wasn't, I mean, it took me like a couple months to get over it, like a normal 16-year-old would.
Yeah.
But then after that, I was like, okay, because then you'd still let me hang out occasionally, like if there was no one like around that was like awful. But no, it was really interesting to go back and listen to everything, and then listen to whatever parts of that conversation that we all had, and like, Etsy, thank you for being a good dad, as Jen said on Wednesday.
She called me a good dad.
Yeah, she was like, Etsy was just
Your
being
rank
a good
was
dad.
Guild Daddy. There was a reason for that.
Dude was just looking out for me though, so I can't be mad at him. So he found me a guild, and that's when I would move over to Arcanum. I would still play with the shots fired guys here and there, but I would take the lessons I learned and applied it to the rest of my game moving forward. This is when I would really dig into my YouTube channel, which at the start would be known as NobleSWTOR. But prior to that, I had a CT Vicious SWTOR YouTube channel that only amassed 20 subscribers. I took inspiration from other YouTubers at the time, like Wizbasky and LazyLit. Sadly, LazyLit has removed all of his videos, but he was one of the channels that I really admired. At first, all I uploaded was gameplay with background dubstep music. You all know it from back in the day. I didn't start making PvP commentary until around 2015, 2016. My goal was to never be the channel that I've become now. I just wanted to share SWTOR PvP with as many people as possible. Now, these videos were not the best, not by a long shot, and some of the videos back then just straight up had bad advice in them, but it was what I knew at the time, and I was excited to be a part of a community on YouTube. I would upload almost daily for 2 years or so, but not even cracking 100 subscribers. Then in 2018, things really exploded. People started watching my commentary videos on the community. I wanted to be something positive for the space. Players seem really scared to join ranked or PvP in general, and being passionate about that part of the game, I wanted to bring positivity and get more people into the space. This was met with mixed reactions, but that's to be expected in a place where egos and competition runs high. I want to take this time to talk about what's probably known as the biggest elephant in the room when it comes to PvP, and that's the toxicity factor.
That guild is completely afraid to do ranked because everything they tell me is, oh, ranked is toxic. People tell me, to kill myself, and they, flame me for not doing X, Y, and Z, and I have no idea what I'm doing and all this other stuff, and I'm just trying to play ranked. it can be brutal in there. I will be the first to admit it can be very brutal in there.
Do you think that it ever was as bad as, you know, people say it was, now that we've been removed from it for multiple years at this point? I mean, I would tend to say it was, because you had so many people not participate because they were afraid of getting like kicked or just the, you know, the toxic gamer moments. But how valid do you think that would be, you know now? Like, was it as bad or a little overblown?
I think I would attribute probably 90%. Yeah, truth to that.
Okay.
It was definitely toxic, for sure. But also, it was like, if you're in that space and you didn't have like a thick skin, or you couldn't like be in that space, like exist and like just kind of like give as good as you get, I guess.
Yeah.
Or you couldn't like roll with the punches, so to speak. You weren't gonna survive. Like, if competitive anything is not your forte, then you're probably best just to stay away.
Right. Yeah.
Like, if there's nothing wrong with like competing for an accomplishment and like wanting to get it, but if you're like competing against other people for that one particular accomplishment, and there's few slots, and there's like a lot of people vying for those slots, yeah, it's gonna get real toxic. It's gonna get super competitive, and the egos are gonna definitely flare up against and clash.
So this is really strange. I started in ranked in like season 8.
Okay.
And the person who got me into it was Nikana.
Oh
and
my God,
I
Nikana,
did not know Nikana. Listen. Hold on. Don't shoot. Hands up, don't shoot. I never talked with him in voice chat. I never knew him whatsoever. I just knew him from like Regs PvP.
Right.
And so I was sitting like on the PvP section of Fleet, as one does, and he's sitting there and he DMs me and says Q ranked. And I'm like, I don't know any ranked. And he's like, that's fine. It'll be fine. We just need you to pop Q ranked. And so it got me into ranked. And I was one of the very few people that Nikana did not yell at and call a shitter over and over and over again, because I did him that one solid and queued up ranked and wasn't terrible. And so like I rode that wave for like 6 years of like not being on his bad side, and he wouldn't throw on me.
There is always going to be a certain level of toxic behavior where competition is present. This doesn't just apply to the PvP community in SWTOR, but in the PvE community as well. One community was not worse than the other, and to say otherwise is just disingenuous at best. The PvP community had a lot of issues that negatively impacted the population and its reputation.
Right, and you talked about how it keeps getting worse and worse and worse. I feel like the size of the community has really ramped up that toxicity, right? Yeah. Because when everyone knows everyone else on the other team and on their own team, you have that personal history and beef with these people, and it's easier to be mad at someone that you know in a way that is like deeply hurtful. Right? It's one thing to run into someone in a Modern Warfare 2 lobby and barrage them with slurs and insults. And that's like, if someone does that to you, that's a random person. It doesn't mean anything, right?
Yeah, right.
But if Noble logs into my ranked PvP game and says, Mark Biggs, you absolute shitter, I hated your guides, you are no good, have a very bad day, hope your dog dies. Like it means more because you know the source. And when you know the source, you can be more mean.
Did you have any, experiences with that, since you mostly played with your friends, or any instances there from really any time?
Yeah, especially with my friends.
Oh yeah, right.
Yeah, all my own teammates are the most toxic. No, but I mean, for sure. I mean, I think if there's a player in the match in the ranked game that doesn't have any gear or has like really shitty gear, right? were they called names? Yes, for sure, right? And we already talked about like the griefing, queue syncing, things like that is also a way of, we could say toxicity in a way, right? Or even like the worst things like intentionally stucking, throwing matches and so on. For sure, I've seen that as well. And then there's the other thing, right? There's like this shit talk between teams in group rank, for example, or just between PvP guilds in general. For sure, that's a thing. But yeah, like you said, I mean, in a way, I think that's also, I mean, almost normal in a way.
Yeah.
When you have like a competitive environment and not all necessarily bad, right? So I'm not for calling players names if they don't have gear.
Right.
But especially the part where you trash talk a little, right?
Yeah.
Especially if it's maybe creative, if it's funny. Not when it's personal or simply calling people names. I think that's a bit boring. But if it's creative, I think it can be fun, and you can have, especially maybe like a healthy rivalry between some teams or between players.
Yeah.
It's normal. It makes it more fun, right? Makes the things more interesting because I remember when we were playing ranked in season 5, and we were not that high ranked, but eventually we managed to get a couple of wins of the team that was rank 1 at the time. And it felt really good, but not because they were the rank 1 team, or at least not only, but also because we had a bit of a rivalry with them, right? And those guys, they were cocky guys, they were shit talk at least.
In 2019, I was invited to join the guild Actually Toxic on the SWTOR server, and guess what? The name lived up to the hype. I ignored this for the most part because it reminded me of the older PvP guilds I had been a part of in the early years. People were toxic, but they were also really good at the game, and egos are involved heavily when it comes to things like ratings and PvP titles. It just came with the territory. Hindsight being 2020, I probably should have said something, but it was the first real PvP guild I had been a part of since the Vicious days, and I wasn't going to give that up for anything. The win trading plagued the ranked scene. I never participated in the win trading, but I knew people who did. It was rampant in almost every season. A lot of this can be chalked up to the PvP scene being so small, and if the PvP community had been managed properly by the developers, they wouldn't have been able to get away with so much griefing and hacking. But I think that the biggest thing outside of the toxicity within the community was all of the win trading, and I haven't gotten a lot of people to talk about this, but I do, because it was definitely a big part of why participation dropped in the first place, which when it dropped, then you had all of the win traders and the less than stellar individuals essentially be left to their own devices and could win trade even more. And I know that we definitely knew people who ran in those circles. How do you think that affected the PvP community as a whole, especially in the later seasons before it eventually got shut down?
Win trading was always a thing, but it was never a problem until the later half. I would say it probably started the worst around season 9, season 10, because that's when the game started to slow down the most. But it was definitely prevalent before that.
Oh yeah,
but it wasn't as condensed onto so few servers. It was more spread out. It was in these small little communities, but once they condensed everything onto these quote unquote mega servers or whatever, it started to affect the community a lot more, because you started to see people coordinate when they would queue, and based on how many wins and losses you had, your ranking at the time. I think some people were able to figure out how to queue up against certain opponents if there were, too many people in the queue at the time, because you could never know who was queued up, right?
Yeah.
There was no like definitive way to know how many people were queued for rank, right? But there were certain times towards the later half of the later seasons, where, okay, there's only going to be, X amount of people in the solo queue. So if we all queue up at this time, we can kind of like rig our matches or get favorable matches against, at least ourselves. Not saying that people would outright throw matches all the time.
Yeah.
But it would be, you were able to control where your wins and losses came from.
I remember back in season 1 of Arenas, where you got like the Garadas Rancor and all that. I was lucky enough to get all that on my Scoundrel, and I remember I only played I think 30 or 40 ranked matches until I got gold. But I remember the last couple rounds, there was just some bad team in queue, because I got it in team ranked, and there was just a bad team that kept queuing, and we went like 8-0, like to round out the season, and I ended up getting gold. That was the only character I got gold on in that season. But then also with how small the PvP community was, because what you could do is basically say, look, there's 16 of us, or there's 8 of us. We're all in the same guild. Obviously not gonna win trade, but like we're probably just gonna end up playing against each other because no one else is queuing. And I think BioWare had a hard time being able to figure out like who was actually win trading and who wasn't from that perspective, because honestly, at least back in the early seasons, there were enough people that you knew people in other guilds and you were friends with them and ran in the same circles, and you would backfill for team ranked if one of their guys couldn't make it or anything like that. So like there could be a situation where it's 4 people, let's just say, from actually Toxic, and then there just happens to be 4 from Lukewarm Tauntauns, and you guys are all friends, and then you guys queue and get against each other, and there's no way for BioWare to say, okay, these guys are definitely throwing or definitely win trading, when it was a truly legitimate match, but we just knew, or we or whoever, like, you just knew that you would go up against each other. I don't know if that would be considered win trading, because I think in most of those situations, the better team, at least back when I was like playing team ranked in the early seasons, if one team won 2 in a row, we'd break up the teams, and then we'd like keep queuing after that. Like I don't think that was win trading. I think that's just a byproduct of how small the community was, and you wanted it to pop, so you had to make something work.
On the other hand, you cannot blame the players for the low player base, right? You have to blame the developers or whatever the circumstances. Yeah, like I said, I mean that for sure was the case. I mean the situation I mentioned earlier with the rep side where there was no one queuing. I think at some point also, at least from what I heard, don't want to accuse anyone, but because the population was so low on the Republic side, I think there was a notorious guild who basically queued as a foreman pre-made for solo ranked, because sometimes they would be the only 4 players queuing, so they made some characters. They were a rep guild, I think, and they were queuing exclusively for solo ranked, so they would get into a solo ranked match as basically a foreman pre-made, and then just get their rating that way, right?
Yeah.
Which, of course, is a way of gaming the system. That's the only way to call it. But can you blame the players, if there are only 4 players that want to play ranked at that point? I mean, not really.
Now, I can't speak for other players, especially like you said in the later seasons, who were just straight win trading. It wasn't, or throwing or whatnot, it wasn't that hard to spot. And luckily, I was never great enough to be accused of win trading, so that was awesome. But
yeah, I think when people throw the term win trading around, they mostly refer to the team ranked, like, hey, we're all in the same guild, we're queuing at the same time. You know, these are our throwaway characters, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
You know, whose ranks we don't care about.
Yeah.
And, you know, they're not the most geared characters, and we're not going to, like, not play the game. We're not going to throw the match. But we also know that, you know, if we go up against a team that has full augments and top tier gear against a team that is, you know, not so geared, doesn't have augments, and is kind of like fresh 70s or fresh 75, whatever the max level was at the time.
Yeah.
You know, I think the outcome is pretty clear.
This was somewhat addressed in the later seasons, but due to BioWare not addressing it fast enough, it became its own monster. If you weren't known by someone in the community, you would be vote kicked out of matches. Sometimes you would even be vote kicked for not doing enough perceived damage or healing, or for no reason at all. You would not even be told. It was an awful experience for players who had never experienced ranked before. I was a victim of this many times, but part of that was because people knew who I was and just wanted to grief me. That comes with the territory of making YouTube videos. No matter the reasoning, this made a lot of players despise PvP and the community as a whole, which I can't blame them for. Eventually, the community got so small that it just became rather difficult to be any kind of positive voice to be heard, which was a shame. So I left SWTOR PVP content creation for almost 2 years before returning and then leaving once again. But then 2 years ago, BioWare did something that really killed off what was left of the PvP players that I knew. They removed ranked PvP from the game entirely and replaced it with a seasonal PvP track and the option to specifically queue for 4v4 arenas. I have mixed feelings on this, to say the least. This was sold to the community as a PvP revamp. This was code for just removing a system that they had already neglected so much that they lost all control. This led to the final exodus of most PvP players, and I still don't understand why they thought this was a good idea to shut rank down.
And I don't want to speak out of turn against, because I genuinely did have a very good experience with the people at BioWare at the time.
Yeah.
And when they came up to us and asked for feedback from some people that what they were going to do with the PvP revamp, I told them straight up, like, I'm going to quit the game if this happens. And they said, we understand, like, we appreciate the feedback. And then they went ahead and did it. And I don't blame them for doing what they did.
Yeah, I think it was not a good idea. And the reasons decided especially didn't really, like, convince me either. I mean, like I already said, yeah, toxicity, yes, sure, but I mean, you can manage that, right? If they would have put any form of moderation to the system and, like, just, you know, took away the titles or whatever else those players were doing and properly moderated it, right? So that if someone is really trolling, which sometimes went on, or, you know, even hacking, exploiting, and so on, which sometimes went unpunished for weeks and months from what I saw.
And I knew they were going to make the change, and it was really hard for me because people would come into my chat and say, hey, PvP revamp's coming up, is that going to be good? And I had to, like, it's going to be something, because I couldn't tell them, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it made me feel very fraudulent. Fraudulent isn't the right word, because I knew that I was, like, bound to not talk about this thing.
Right, yeah.
But it didn't make me feel good to have to look people that I know in the eyes and say, it's going to be something, and not tell them, like, it's going to be, and to hide that information from these people that I really knew.
Yeah.
Right. And so it really put me in a bad spot, just, like, personally, in a place that I didn't enjoy being.
No,
and so and especially as someone where I felt like my niche really was ranked PvP, and, like, that being so much in the ranked PvP scene gave me that credibility of, like, hey, he knows what he's talking about, right?
Yeah.
Like, I personally love my PvE content. I know it's not what I'm known for, right? Yeah. Like, that I the most fun I had in this game was actually doing, like, Q dodge and hard mode and nightmare raiding. But, like, that's not what people came to my channel for. They came for the ranked PvP.
Yeah.
And that was my brand, and that was everything that I really like. I really leaned into it, and then boom, it's gone. And so, not that it was like a personal betrayal to me, but I felt like if I was going to keep making SWTOR content, it was going to have to be something that I didn't enjoy as much, or that wasn't going to be as authentically me. And I had burned out a little bit in that between period of knowing they were doing the revamp and when they were launching it, of like, I knew it was all going to be for nothing.
They knew what they had to do in order to keep the game mode and the community, but they opted to just remove it outright. This pretty much made me play the game less and less until I just stopped playing altogether. But as you probably know, I would return to the game and hit the PvP queue once again. So why do I keep returning? Simply put, I love the PvP in this game, ranked or not. While I haven't talked about the gearing and performance issues, that has always plagued the game, but there are better people more equipped than me to talk about that. What I learned from all of these experiences with content creation was that I just took the game too seriously. I didn't have to make some of the grand statements about the community issues, but as a teenager and a young adult, I was passionate about PvP. It was what I had spent the previous decade working on, getting better, and wanting to get other players to improve as well. I quit SWTOR content creation because I truly believed that it was time to hang it up. I was making content for the wrong reasons. To quote myself in my Vanilla SWTOR was the best MMO ever made video, I have been stuck in the past wishing that I could go back and create the good old days. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't bring back the little things that made SWTOR PvP so enjoyable. I couldn't bring back the friends who moved on from the game years ago.
It just started to die off, as in like, if we even tried to start playing, people would just stop queuing.
Yeah, they'd queue dodge.
And it just started being this thing where it's just like, I can't play the part of the game that I enjoy the most. So like, why am I going to continue to sub to the game and spend money on something that I can't even actually play? So it just ended up being both a financial decision and also like time decision too. As at that part of my life, I was finishing college, and just kind of getting ready for professional school. Just kind of needed to start to dial it back a little bit.
When did you like stop playing for like the first time, and then like what was the reasoning behind it? Because obviously now, like again, like I now know that everyone was actually living life at that point, and I wasn't. So I didn't understand it at the time.
Yeah. It had to be around the time Chris and I moved in together. Just because I was working full time and I was working, I was bartending, so I had longer hours and stuff, right?
What had you guys like stop playing the game to go on and do other stuff?
Just the lack of everybody else.
Yeah.
It was a co-op game, and there was no co-op anymore. Like I said, arenas came out, and I just didn't care about anything that wasn't objective. And there was just no point. We'd already beaten everything else, and there weren't any other updates coming out of new crazy things.
Yeah, we ended up going into raiding sometime after that.
Mm-hmm.
And raiding was good for a while, but like then they stopped coming out with like full raids, and they're just releasing like single bosses.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and at that point I was like, I'm gonna try to find us another game to play. And we played WildStar for a bit. That
was really fun.
Fun, yeah, it was actually really fun. But like their netcode was like so terrible that like if you had the slightest bit of lag, your telegraphs would just miss everything. I knew that the guild Vicious Shots Fired was eventually going to fade away, and I was trying to find ways to just migrate us to a different game. In the end, that's you can do that with some people, but it won't last forever. Weston was actually the only person that stayed with me in WoW, I think.
Yeah, and I think another thing when we fizzled out is one of the things in the game was, since we were so hardcore heavy PvP, we got told that we would be trash at PvE, and we could never do that. Started doing all that, and ended up, you guys got
rushing everyone.
Yeah, you got world third on something, I think.
World fourth on the Ravagers raid.
Okay, so yeah, you guys ended up doing that. We beat all the content, and nothing else came out. So I feel like that was why a lot of people left also. It's like we conquered both sides of it now.
Yeah.
Now we've truly done everything.
Yeah, we did it all.
It's like we're the best at everything now, and we can
guild.
actually back it up.
Yeah.
So what do we do now?
I don't think I remember exactly why you stopped.
Well, I mean, like I said, I mean, when the player base becomes so thin that the only people that are like competing and playing and taking it somewhat seriously, they don't have time to like wait on these queues to play against the same people over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. So, you know, it becomes a situation where you're like, well, we're all waiting for the same people to get on.
Yeah.
So what else are we going to play in the meantime? Well, you know, I heard about this game, so let's go check that out. You know, and eventually it was like, oh, this game's actually pretty fucking cool. And there's a bunch of fucking people playing. And they've got really cool PvP. And it's actually really cool. And, you know, like, one thing led to another. And it's like, oh, it's, you know, now I'm playing this game. So
yeah. No, that's
because I'm having like way more fun. I've met a whole new community of people that are on all the time. And yeah, it's just fun.
Yeah,
that's what you're chasing. You're chasing the fun.
Yeah, and especially like you're not going to be able to. I mean, obviously you make new memories and new friends in various games that you play. One thing that I found, obviously, that you can't remake like those fun experiences that you had like in like vanilla Star Wars or wherever you were playing your games first, because that was me for essentially half of my lifespan playing like this game, where it's like, okay, always trying to recreate the best PvP guild on Jung Ma, like creating those experiences and those moments and with the people and the friendships that I have made along the way. But obviously, you know, life comes into play. We're all doing different things, moved on to bigger and better things, which is always interesting. I think people treat that differently depending on who you ask.
It was like a lot of different things all at the same time, I feel like, whereas like primary focus, not being able to play what I want to play. It's like I'd sit playing for like 4 hours and really get to play like 2 matches, and I'm just like, this is just not worth the time anymore.
Did you stop playing because of time, or like how did that work for you?
Oh gosh, yeah. A couple things. Of course, with everybody else leaving, it's like when all your friends leave, what do? You either find new friends to play with, or you go wherever your friends went. Mm-hmm. So initially, I had stopped because like everybody left. The game was not. I mean, it wasn't dead, but I think it was just before server merges happened. Mm-hmm. And it was hard to get like matches and games and stuff like that, and it was getting a bit stale because like at that point I had become a big PvEer. Mm-hmm. PvP was fun, but I was like, PvE is the new challenge, and like when everybody left from doing PvE, I was like, well, this sucks. So everybody jumped onto WoW, and I was like, oh, I liked WoW. Like I played WoW, I had fun with it. I would happily jump back into it again. So I went with everybody when that happened, and then my life at that point was basically work out, so I go to the gym and play WoW. Mm-hmm. And that was a lot. And then I started dating my now wife, probably about within a year of that. It was 2017 when I met her and we started dating. It was like the middle of the year. It was like June, July, and August when we started like talking more, hanging out, and officially started to date. So that was what really made it difficult.
Right.
Because it was hard to have a more serious relationship and also game, because she was not a gamer in any way, shape, or form. She had never seen Star Wars until I introduced it to her. Mm-hmm. Yeah, she wasn't into that at all. So I was kind of like, okay, well, I still want to go to the gym and work out a lot. And then as I was finishing up graduate school, we got engaged, so I was about ready to get married. So it was like, okay, well, now I'm busy planning a wedding, and if I'm sitting here playing video games all day, my wife's, or well, fiance, now wife, is going to kill me. So I
Right.
can't do that the
Yep.
entire time. But I got another computer. I think it was my brother's old one, and it wasn't, I don't know if it was as powerful as, but it was newer, so it had okay enough specs to play the game. So I booted it up, tried it out, installed it, and it worked. So I was like, okay, I guess I'll play for a little bit. And then when our daughter was born, I was like, okay, I'm out of time. So
Right.
I can't tell the baby to stop crying and wait for me to get done a PvP match.
Yeah,
so.
yeah, exactly. Well, that makes sense.
I'd get yelled at really bad. So and I don't feel like I could do that as a father. So
No, all sound decisions. Like there's not one bad one in there. Like when I got married in 2021.
Oh, congrats! I didn't know that. Okay.
Thank you. Yeah. Crazy that like if you were to tell me like a decade ago that like I'd be married, and still be able to do some things and whatnot, I'd be like, that's ridiculous. But no, it'll be 4 years in May coming up, so I'm definitely happy with how my life has progressed. And yes, I obviously don't game as much as I used to or else I'd wind up single again, and we've put way too much work into this already, so like what are we doing? Quickly going back to the 2015-2016 era, you said you had gotten busy with work. That was the primary driver of you no longer playing?
I think that, and I was just like losing interest.
Mm-hmm.
It was to the point where people were really starting to leave for other games. And I just remember it would take forever to get pops for ranked.
Yeah.
Because at the time it was just group. They didn't do solo, and then they did solo ranked, but then like you get like, pick of the litter and you're just like, ah, shit, you're only as good as your worst player, and that's not really like the worst player's fault. But I just remember they'd have the like that Brazilian guild with Q solo ranked, and you'd get like one or two of those guys on your team, and just like, this is over. Yeah. So, and then you're like, well, if you're playing like a non-stealth class, you're kind of, it's not really that much fun. People like even some of the rating and stuff, like they didn't really introduce a lot of new content. So at the time, it was like I played through everything I really wanted to play through. PvP was dying, and work was just pretty busy, and I just wound up getting in a serious relationship. Who's not my wife, was busy there, and just found like different interests. So there wasn't anything that was just like, fuck this, I'm quitting this game and I never come back to it. It was just the playing just became like less and less frequent, to the point where I started just playing different stuff or just doing other things with my life.
I couldn't bring back the ranked system or the excitement and enthusiasm around PvP. This is the way all MMO communities seem to go. All things, even really good things, come to an end at some point.
And the match was tied, and then with that game, they were losing, we had the lead. So it was like 7-5 or whatever. So like we were just above them by 1 point. All we had to do was either run the clock out, but they had the ball and they were protecting it pretty well, and they were running it towards the end zone. And whoever scores last when it's a tie gets the win.
Yeah.
They were trying to like score at the last possible second to where it wouldn't go through. And I was on my scoundrel, invisible, but beside him. Ended up stunning him. He used his breaker and didn't realize it. And then I ended up stunning him, and he couldn't cross the goal line before the game ended. It was so satisfying that we ended up winning it the last few seconds when we were supposed to lose it, because like we couldn't get a kill on them. So he was so far deep in there, you couldn't grip him out and pull him into one of the fire traps. They had all their healers and tanks focusing in. Like, it was really, they're really put together and had everything managed. And then it's just like luck of the draw, like just stunned him and he couldn't cross the goal line to score. That was one of my favorite like 8v8 matches that I got to play in.
You remember the 8-man ranked, right? Like, where it was like Void Star, like we'd actually do ranked. It was pre-arenas.
Yeah.
And it was you remember Forsaken, like Cerrone?
Ah, yes. Good old Cerrone.
Yes.
Yeah.
Good old Cerrone. And he and I were actually really cool.
Really?
And oh yeah,
nice.
for a long time.
Okay.
So I would be, the one arranging. Well, like Furion would like just pretend and troll and like get it. He was in Forsaken on something, but I was actually like, he and I were cool, and so I was like, yeah, let's do 8-man ranked, and I would just hop back in between whatever TeamSpeak or whatever we were using.
Yeah.
And I remember Ron, like he sounded like Kid Rock for one thing, and I just remember him they lost to us like really fucking bad actually. And I popped over there just to see what he was saying, just fucking screaming at his guildmates, because I had more protection as a DPS than his tanks did. And all I do is taunt. Yeah, like screaming. And I was just like, man, I'm so glad I'm not in this guild. And I just left.
There are a lot of fun times play with those guys too. I just remember, what was it? Was it Sabotage, the smuggler spec?
Saboteur. That's the
Saboteur. That's what it was. The carpet bombs.
Yeah.
We used to call it wall banging, where you get somebody in the corner and then you'd hard switch to them, and it was super broken. I just remember Severic rolling into it, and it was like either Sakari or somebody like that. Yeah. We just global the healer, and it died immediately. I just remember it took us. I think it went to the gas at that point, or just like went. The match went really well because I just remember we were just laughing so hard about how stupid that was.
So my favorite memory from this game comes from a group of PvPers where we made this raid team called Q Dodge Mechanics.
Yeah.
And because a bunch of PvEers had said that PvPers were shit at the game, they didn't know what they were doing, right? Yeah. And we're like, you know what? We'll come to your house and piss in your Cheerios, right?
Exactly. Right.
Let's go and take down the hardest content that you have, right?
Yeah.
And so we get to Apex Vanguard, and it is the last weekend before the game is supposed to launch in 7.X.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were like, if we don't kill Apex here, we have to start all over, because it'll be 7.X. You have to gear all over again, have to do all this stuff. And so we're pulling late into the night. It's like 12:30 in the morning, and we get down to last ditch, and we're going, and both of our healers die during last ditch. And so we're like, just push. That's 5% left in the boss. Push. A missile salvo goes out, and literally everyone on the team except for myself and one of our tank dies. And it's like there was 1% left on the boss, and we were like, if it doesn't happen here, it's never gonna happen. And so me and the tank, we kill the boss with just a fraction of health left, and just that group of 8 PvP nerds that I love so dearly, like coming into the PvE house and pissing in their Cheerios and showing them the PvPers can in fact PvE. That is my most sacred memory of this game.
That's
and
awesome.
It's mostly sacred because the people I did it with, right?
Yeah,
because those guys are like so precious and dear to me, and I care about them in a deeply emotional way of I wouldn't want to be with anyone else at any other time in any other place than with those guys right there, right?
Yeah.
And
exactly.
just the sensation of getting, this is going to sound really weird, but when you're the last guy left of a group of 8, you really do feel like a hero in that moment.
Yeah, you are the one. You're it.
I'm the chosen one. I'm Anakin Skywalker in this moment. And so like it was the truest, like Samwell being like, I cannot carry the ring, but I can carry you. You know what I mean? Like it was such a special moment to me that I don't think, with 100 well-crafted storylines, if you told me that happened, I wouldn't believe you. Right. Like truth is stranger than fiction. And it was just something that I will hold precious until I'm dead.
I wanted to make this video as a proper nod to what in my opinion is the best PvP in any MMO and one of the best communities in all of MMOs back in the day. I'm sure there's going to be some jaded player in the comments who will share their experiences about PvP and how it didn't work well for them. And what I'll say to all of you watching is please don't be toxic. What I have realized in my time away from SWTOR content creation is that everyone actually has different experiences, and not being willing to listen to everyone's experiences doesn't do well for anyone, and it makes the community a lot more fragmented than it needs to be. Whether you PvP, RP, or PvE, none of that matters, and I would love to hear your experiences with PvP in the comment section. You have heard from a lot of people in this video who have shaped me as a gamer. I would like to take this time to thank all of them for making the time to sit down with me. Some, it's been almost a decade since we've spoken, and I really appreciated the time you took to sit down and just reminisce and talk about the game that we all loved so much. I will admit, writing this script and recording and getting everything set up has made me super nostalgic, like these videos often do. Every time I boot up Star Wars The Old Republic, I queue for an arena or a regular Warzone, and I just get sent back to a time where I would hear the constant screaming of my guildmates in Vicious and Shots Fired when we globaled someone, or in being in the actually toxic guild when we grief our own teammates. As toxic as that sounds, it just was fun, and you kinda had to be there. Thank you guys so much for watching. My name is Noble. I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.